The Cincinnati Bengals need depth at defensive tackle, and Montravius Adams, a former Pittsburgh Steeler, is in town on Monday to potentially be that answer.
You are Locked On Bengals, your daily Cincinnati Bengals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What up, Bengals fans, and welcome to another episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. I'm your host, Jake Liscow. He's your host, James Rapien. We are Locked On Bengals on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And James and I have been doing this collectively since 2016, covering the Cincinnati Bengals here. And if you're an everydayer, well, you've heard me say that before. But if you're not an everydayer yet, and you're looking for a daily source of what's going on with the Cincinnati Bengals, news analysis, everything you could possibly want, covering your favorite team, you're in the right place, and all you have to do is hit that subscribe button on YouTube or anywhere you get your podcast, and you will not miss an episode. Shout out to everyone who makes Locked On Bengals their first listen as well. We really appreciate those good listening habits, we'll call them. So get in the habit of making Locked On Bengals your first listen. Today we're going to talk about a former Pittsburgh Steeler, a former Green Bay Packer, a connection to a Cincinnati Bengals new coaching hire in Montravius Adams, a defensive tackle prospect who is visiting the Bengals on Monday. And maybe he's signed by the time you're listening to this episode, because we're recording this before he's signed his contract. And what that means, the Bengals are looking for at that spot. And that kind of dovetails into a conversation around where else we might see them be active and kind of doing some likelihood and philosophy, what we think they think conversation later in the show, but we'll start with Adams.
Yeah, it's something that we've certainly discussed a ton. The fact that this Bengals defensive front needs more depth, needs a veteran, could use multiple, to be honest with you, from a depth standpoint. In Montravius Adams, he's someone that obviously has the history with Jerry Montgomery. You mentioned prospect. He's a prospective Bengal for sure at this stage, but he's far from that. I mean, he's pushing our age. Not really.
Did I say 29 prospect?
Years? You did, yeah. But it's fine.
Great.
But he's 29. He's played for a bunch of different teams. Spent 4 years with the Packers, a year with the Steelers, a year with the Saints, and 3 more years with the Steelers. And one thing that I think is interesting, just looking at that pattern, is you spend 4 years with the Packers. Well, now Jerry Montgomery is willing to look at you in Cincinnati. You spend a year in Pittsburgh, and then they bring you back after he went with the Saints and played for the Saints in 2021 as well. So in 2021, he split time with both teams. Regardless, though, I think that we all agree they need more depth. Even if it's a guy, if you hadn't heard of Montravius Adams before today, doesn't matter. He's 29. He's not 34. He's not Lawrence Guy, a guy that was literally probably retired and then got a call from the Bengals mid-year. Like, this is a guy that might be able to contribute and help the Bengals in a bunch of different ways. And Jake, this is how dedicated Jake Liscow is. I texted him about an hour ago as we started to have a little dialogue about the show. Obviously, we knew that Montravius Adams was in town on Monday, and he said, I've just watched 28 different pressures from Montravius Adams over the past 2 years. It's called dedication. Jake Liscow, what did you see when you looked at those 28 pressures?
Yeah, Adams, 28 pressures over the last 2 years, most of those in 2023. 2024, he played a lot less snaps and was less disruptive on a percentage basis in those snaps. So whether that's age-related decline, which would be weird at 29 years old, or just a year where he's battling through injury. I think he did have a stint on the IR last year, which could have contributed to his diminished playing time. That might have affected his play down the stretch. He was a little bit worse by most measures in 2024 than 2025. But Montravius Adams is, if you haven't watched him before, you didn't really pay attention to him when he's on the Pittsburgh Steelers the last couple of years, because he's playing next to TJ Watt and Cam Hayward and Alex Highsmith, and those are guys that you're paying more attention to on the Pittsburgh Steelers defensive line. I mean, I don't think we talked about Montravius Adams a single time when we were talking to Chris Carter in any of the crossovers we did on the Steelers, but he's a wide-bodied, kind of undersized nose tackle. He's listed at 304, 305, so just over 300 pounds, where you think about a DJ Reader type of nose tackle at 330, or even McKinley Jackson, a bigger player, pushing a little bit further over 300 pounds. But has that body type where he looks like a nose tackle. He'll look like a broad-shouldered, wide player, and he lines up a lot at nose tackle. He'll also kick out to 3-tech as well. At least he did with the Steelers. But a lot of his success as a pass rusher, and that's despite his build, kind of the strength of his game. Stylistically, he's a gap shooter. So again, think McKinley Jackson, the way McKinley Jackson likes to get upfield off the ball, not like DJ Reader, where you're going back to an episode we did with Mike Santagata, Bengals fans, a few months ago now, when we were talking about Al Golden's defense, attack, react versus react, attack, where you're attacking first, getting upfield, then reacting to what you see, versus see what you see, then figure out your plan of attack. Different philosophical approaches to which mental process comes first. Much more of a gap penetrator, get upfield kind of player is my take on Montravius Adams. He's trying to beat you across your face, get into the gap before you can get there when you're an offensive lineman trying to block him. And a lot of his success as a pass rusher comes when he's head up on the center, which is kind of interesting. Because that's not a spot where you would consider a ton of guys to have a lot of success as pass rushers, Dexter Lawrence being the notable exception there, and not comparing Montravius Adams to Dexter Lawrence at all, to be clear. But from a stylistic perspective, he likes to hit it with that two-way go and beat the center to a spot and get upfield before the center can set to that spot on the head-up two-way go. So that was something that stood out to me when I was watching him and where his pass rush success came from. The other thing that stood out is he was pretty effective with the Steelers when he's used on stunts and twists, and that could be an area where Al Golden is looking for the fit. Jerry Montgomery is looking for the fit in terms of scheming up some pass rush, designing some fancy blitzes, delayed blitzes, Landon Roberts coming through gaps behind these guys when they're twisting in front of them on certain linebacker, defensive line, twist kind of blitzes, or even just getting out into the tackle and those traditional end tackle twists. You saw some of that from him as well. So there's some position versatility from him as far as where he can line up on the defensive line, in my opinion, anywhere from nose out to 3-tech. But I do wonder the stylistic fit. Like he fills more of what they need from a what he will produce perspective, in that I think he is a guy that should give you more in the pass rush than in run defense. But from a body type perspective, he's in that vein of a nose tackle as far as how he's built.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think the way you describe him is something that certainly fits to a degree. Now, how many snaps is he getting? All of those things. Well, we'll see. But someone that can penetrate on the interior and beat a center and give them, one, knows AFC North ball, knows Jerry Montgomery. I think the familiarity thing, there's multiple levels of it there. I was looking at different images of him, and there was one of him bringing Jake Browning down from 2023. That year, obviously, you said it, his pass rush production was higher than it was in 2024. Other fun fact, he was teammates at Auburn with Carl Lawson. Saw a picture of them. They took a photo together a couple of years ago with when Lawson was with the Jets and Adams was with the Steelers. So I didn't think about the Auburn connection, but they go back then. So it just kind of shows age-wise where he's at. But look, there was a legitimate discussion. We did a little bit on the college free agents, but it's not like we spent multiple days on it. There was a legitimate, and still is, I think, a legitimate discussion like, oh, well, this college free agent or that college free agent could emerge in the defensive line room.
Yeah.
If you're Montravius Adams, this is kind of a no-brainer destination because you think you can make the roster. And I'm sure you're looking at it like, oh, well, I can contribute on this defensive front, not just make the team, but be active and matter. And if I'm the Bengals, I want a guy that's proven enough to have 28 pressures over the past 2 years, even if it is on a really good defensive line in Pittsburgh, even if he isn't one of the guys, and I say that in quotes, that really matter in that Pittsburgh defensive front, whatever. It would be good to add some experience. So I hope this gets done by the time people hear this or watch this.
You touched on a few things there that make it sound like it's something that makes a ton of sense to happen. Let's talk about that a little bit and then dive into what we might see as the next most likely position for the Bengals to target. But there's a little bit more on the Montravius Adams bone for us to get to here before we move on to the next topic. We'll continue that conversation coming up next.
The NBA playoffs are in full swing, and it is conference finals time. That's right. Whether you think it's going to be the Knicks or the Pacers out of the East, or Timberwolves and Thunder in the West, the NBA playoffs are the perfect time to get in on all of the fun with FanDuel. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, same-game parlays. They have an SGP button where you can make same-game parlays live and follow everything right from your FanDuel app. So download the FanDuel app today, and right now it's the perfect time to sign up, because when you head to FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app, place that first $5 bet, and when it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. That's right, $200 in bonus bets at FanDuel.com when your first $5 bet wins. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sports betting partner of the NBA.
There are so many reasons this move makes sense on paper. The Bengals, you're talking about college free agents competing for DT5 right now. And maybe they keep an extra end. Maybe they go light at defensive tackle. Maybe that's where this ends up eventually. But if they have one injury to any of their guys on the roster who aren't college free agent defensive tackles, their cupboard is bare as far as veteran replacements. So there's that. There's a Jerry Montgomery connection, the familiarity with the player from his time when he was a younger player in the NFL back in Green Bay on his first contract, on his rookie contract. The AFC North familiarity, another significant factor. You put all those things together. Guy's been in the AFC North for a few years. He knows the defensive line coach, and there is a dire and pressing and glaring hole for DT5, which is typically a position the Bengals carry. Mm-hmm. It would really add up. And from a body type perspective, from the way he plays perspective, if they can get McKinley Jackson to be more of a hybrid player where he can give you some true nose tackle snaps in addition to what he showed last year, again, as that penetrator, as that gap shooter, and give you that kind of versatility that you're talking about from Montravius Adams, I think stylistically pretty similar players, then that could be solid redundancy for you if you get a little bit of a step out of Jackson and out of course, Chris Jenkins. And then you have Montravius Adams to the room as the fifth guy. And then you can feel okay about your top five, assuming you get those guys to the regular season healthy, where they've had injuries in this unit the last couple of years, and they've had to deal with that.
Yeah, that's where I'm at, is injuries are going to happen. And even the biggest Chris Jenkins Jr. fan in the world or McKinley Jackson fan in the world, BJ Hill is nicked up right now, literally in a boot last time we saw him. And so injuries happen. If they do happen, you need to have other guys that can go in. Like, let's just say the defensive line, whatever the best case scenario is for this defensive front, it happens. For BJ Hill and TJ Slayton and Chris Jenkins Jr. and McKinley Jackson. Okay, great. Well, then in week 5, when Detroit's in town, if McKinley Jackson gets nicked up in that Friday practice, and they had a lot of weird Friday injuries last year, so I'm just going to kind of follow that theme, and he can't go. And it's not a serious injury, but it's short term, and you have to turn to Montravius Adams. I think that makes sense. Or in the middle of a game, you have to turn to Montravius Adams. I think he can help get you out of that. And that's what you need. Like, even in the best case scenario, you need DT5. I think back to what Duke Tobin said to us at the combine. He was like, I'm always thinking about the defensive front and always wanting more depth. Now, a lot of people may roll their eyes at hearing that. I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but he's always thinking about it. This would be one of those additions where it's just like, all right, this makes sense. It's a solid veteran. No one's going to declare the Bengals legitimate Super Bowl contenders because of it, but it's a signing that could matter at some point this year. And those are the type of moves I think everyone listening to this and watching, and certainly we, want them to make now that we're in the late stages of May.
If they need to sign, and not if, they do need to sign a guy to play 150 to 200 snaps on the interior defensive line. Those snaps are probably still up for grabs, even just compared to last year. Montravius Adams has done that role for the Steelers. He should not break the bank. It's a fine piece to add there. We're not talking about a game changer, like you said. We're talking about a player who can flash in the pass rush from time to time, hasn't stacked up sacks in his career, but can be disruptive, can get the quarterback off his spot, can help flush a quarterback into a player who is better at finishing in the backfield and getting the quarterback to the ground. than he has been in those pressures. That's what shows up for him. He is an enabler. He can help to create a little bit of chaos. And if you can do that from a variety of positions along the defensive line, great. It makes sense to me as a DT5. And we're talking about like Montravius Adams. We talked about Maurice Hurst in the same vein.
Yep.
A more exciting player because of his pre-draft pedigree and the pre-draft scouting report on Hurst. I think Hurst is a better pass rusher, but different style of player too, a smaller body. And then besides that, you're talking about like Raekwon Davis. You're talking about like DeMarcus Walker. It's not like there's a whole lot out there. When we talked about the free agent topic a week or two ago, it was probably 2 weeks or 3 weeks ago now, and we talked about defensive tackle, I remember you asking, like, is there a guy out there that is moving the needle? And it was like, they need a DT5 so they can get that. But as far as a guy that's really, going to be competing for snaps, like a Brandon Scherf kind of signing that would have people a little bit more excited at guard, for example, that guy isn't really there at defensive tackle at this point in the season.
No. And that's why identifying, and again, there's familiarity there. They've had to deal with him for a couple of years. And I know Zach Taylor and company, they look at that Steelers defensive front, and it's always topic one going into Steelers week for this offense. Like, of course it is. And so they know Montravius Adams. And so from Jerry Montgomery, it makes sense. Hopefully, like I said, it gets done, because then it's the other thing is it's a sign, and it's a positive sign that, hey, and I know it's not the big splashy signing. I know it's not the guy that anyone has talked about. I haven't seen one person say, who the Bengals should sign? And watch, someone's going to tweet it at me like, hey, I tweeted about Montravius Adams 2 weeks ago. But like, have you seen a Montravius Adams?
I'm looking at one right now. Yeah. But
from when?
From Joe Goodberry on April 29th, in a list of a lot of players. I feel like I might have even mentioned his name when I was talking about the options at defensive tackle, but maybe I didn't. Maybe I saw his name and didn't actually say it out loud.
Well, so right after he got released. So he got released on the 28th. So makes sense because he's in the news then, and that's it. But it's not like he was high on anyone's list when we talked about it 2 weeks ago. It wasn't like it was like there's just not a lot out there.
Yeah.
But it does mean that the Bengals are trying to make their team better still. It does say, hey, we acknowledge that there are weaknesses, there are flaws. We see what you see. And so, Jake, let's push the convo forward. Does that mean that the dam is going to break, that Montravius Adams could be the first domino to fall, and we could see multiple free agents get signed at positions of need? We will discuss that topic coming up next.
Really setting him up for me to knock him down there, James.
Come on.
Okay, so let's talk about this. I mentioned Brandon Scherf and the idea of signing a Brandon Scherf or a Will Hernandez or a Dalton Reisner or your guy Jedrick Wills as a potential option.
Jedrick Wills.
Their number, and Shaq Mason, I think, is another one of your guys that you're more interested in than I am on the offensive
Shaq
line.
Mason. Yes. Starts right now at right guard. Yeah.
All these guys that the Bengals could go kick the tires on the offensive line. We've talked about safety. We've talked about Julian Blackman a ton. Fans have asked about Justin Simmons quite a bit. But if you had to handicap this, and you're looking at where the roster has depth right now, and I'm not talking about depth that we necessarily like. I'm talking about their veteran pieces here that we think the team likes in some way, shape, or form. We know they really like Cody Ford, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We know over the years that they've really liked Cordell Volson, who's potentially fighting for a roster spot, right?
Mm-hmm.
We know they really like Jackson Kirkland, who's dealt with injuries as an undrafted guy, but is a favorite among offensive line watchers in general for the way he approaches a game, the way he plays offensive line. And in addition to that, they've got Matt Lee, Dylan Fairchild, Jalen Rivers as first and second year players there. They sign Lucas Patrick. So if you're talking about depth at the interior offensive line, that is potentially Cody Ford, Dylan Fairchild, Matt Lee, Lucas Patrick, Jalen Rivers, Cordell Volson. That's 6 guys between first, second year players and veterans. You look at the defensive line room right now, the defensive interior room by comparison, BJ Hill, TJ Slayton, McKinley Jackson, Chris Jenkins, that's only 4 guys. And all 5 of those guys, when there is a fifth, could rotate in a single game.
Yep.
Whereas on the interior offensive line, you're probably talking about one of those guys being inactive on game day if people are healthy.
Mm-hmm.
So, while I think there's consensus that Brandon Sheriff or Will Hernandez would be exciting, move the needle players who could start for you right away and push some of these other guys off the roster potentially.
Yeah.
On the offensive line. It's hard for me to talk myself into the Bengals seeing it that way, where they have all these veterans and young pieces invested there already.
Yeah, I agree. I think especially now with Scott Peters and the questions with Volson, and you have Ford that you think brings stability, and you have a guy in Jalen Rivers that who knows, maybe he at worst is your swing tackle. And it's just, I think that's how they're going to view it. They're going to view Lucas Patrick starting like at right guard, and you have Dylan Fairchild at left guard, and then behind them, maybe it's Cody Ford, or you reverse it and you have Patrick behind Ford, and then you have Rivers. I think that's where it's interesting though, is because I would really give Jalen a shot at right guard. Like if they're constructed the way they are now and they're not going to add anything at camp, I'm begging you. This isn't even me saying, all right, we'll go sign this guy or that guy. Just give him a real shot in real reps to start. Because if he's close to what Lucas Patrick or Cody Ford can give you, well, then just go with the young guy, because maybe by mid-year he's already better and can give you more. And maybe you found 2 guards of the future. And I just wonder if they're going to pull that back because they're going to value the swing tackle element to his game so much that they don't give him a true shot. That would concern me, because I do think that you look at these 2 guys and you could say, all right, well, Jalen Rivers and Dylan Fairchild, maybe they nailed it, and these are your 2 starting guards for the next 4 years. Like, I would love it, but you got to give him a shot to do that.
And then there's a question of how does that factor into development? Say they give him a real shot, right? At guard, but it doesn't stick. And they decide pretty quick, like, no, this is going to be a swing tackle. So how does that impact development from their perspective? Or maybe it does click, and that's great. But maybe, to your point, as you're saying, maybe he's close, but they're not quite comfortable putting him out there at right guard. Think back to last year. I mean, Alex Kappa is your guy who's in silent counts triggering the snap. Alex Kappa, the right guard, is the guy that's looking back at Joe Burrow and communicating with Ted Karras that now's the time to snap the ball. Yep. So is a rookie playing on the right side for the first time? And I think he can play on the right side. I'm not saying that I'm just throwing it out there. It's a rookie who's adapting to a new side of the field for the first time, going to be the guy that they trust early in the season to take that on. If he's close, great. Get him those reps. Absolutely give him the shot. Give him the reps with the guys so that he can be comfortable playing next to Ted Karras, playing next to Amarius Mims.
Yep.
But then maybe they start the year there with a guy they are more comfortable with as a veteran, and Lucas Patrick or Cody Ford at first.
And that sounds very Bengals. And what I would counter that with is, well, then go out and get Sheriff. Go out and get Will Hernandez. Go out and get the real dude. Like, if you're not going to, like, you pick a lane and then you could stick with it. Like, that's fine. Like, if Brandon Sheriff is your right guard, well, then I'm fine putting Rivers in the swing tackle spot. I'm not saying, hey, let him compete with Brandon. Like, that's stupid. And that's what I think. Like, Lucas Patrick, Cordell Volson, and Cody Ford are not good enough. Are not talented enough. Are not, from an age standpoint, long-term enough from an option standpoint to say, oh, well, Rivers shouldn't be in consideration. Brandon Sheriff is just that good.
Right.
And makes you that much better. And so that's the battle that I'm struggling with. And we'll see. I do wonder about Cordell Volson and how he fits in. I think he's firmly in a backup role right now.
So that brings us to, well, if we don't think that they're feeling antsy about signing an offensive lineman.
Yep.
Because I think I've talked myself out of that. at least for now.
Yeah. Ugh.
Where would they address? Because when you go look at ourlads.com/NFL depth chart/depth chart/sin, CIN, you'll see those college free agent highlights in that teal color standing out at number 3 on the depth chart at defensive tackle. That's the most obvious out of any of the spots where you could say, yeah, the Bengals need to add here. It's less obvious, and we've talked a lot about safety, so maybe that makes it obvious to people who are everydayers, but Geno Stone, Jordan Battle, Dejon Anthony, Tyson Anderson is your safety room right now.
Mm-hmm.
We've talked a little bit about corner with Dax coming back from the injury. But if you were looking at it and putting yourself into their shoes, James, where do you think the next most likely spot would be? And I would put these odds at slim in the first place. That's where we started this segment. Like, I'll believe it when I see it right now at another spot. But what do you think would be the next most likely?
Yeah, I think it probably is safety, but it's close. It's close. I mean, you could go a few routes there. I don't really think there are many tight ends out there. I think they're set there, whether they like it or not. They're probably going to roll with the guys they have, and so it's just almost by default, because I think that they like their young corners. I think they're going to give DJ Turner and Kim Taylor-Britt, obviously Dax Hill, every opportunity to flourish. The safety room, what you could say is, man, if there's one injury, kind of like defensive tackle, like if there's one injury, like even if you believe in Geno Stone bouncing back and Jordan Battle, you're going to unleash him. Then after that, and I'm probably the biggest Tyson Anderson fan on the planet, but he hasn't played much on defense. Dejon Anthony is a huge question mark. And then you have Loyal, who you signed last week out of Rutgers, PJ Jules, and Jalen Key, like guys that most people that are everydayers have no idea about. And so that's the spot that, to me, like, you could really say, all right, well, outside of your starters, you have nothing. And Tyson Anderson's a special teamer, and Dejon Anthony, we'll see. I wouldn't go that far because I believe in Tyson more, but you need to see that. And so why wouldn't you go out and address safety? I think they should. You had Geno Stone take a pay cut, take that money and apply it to another safety just to give you some depth. I think that would make sense. Will they do it? I'm not sure, but that's probably the route I would go.
I'm trying to figure out who the Montravius Adams equivalent at safety would be, because it's not Julian Blackmon. Julian Blackmon's too good. Now, if the money's comparable, maybe it
will be
Blackmon.
comparable.
Maybe Julian Blackmon's market isn't there, but I do think that, Justin Simmons, Julian Blackmon, the names we've talked about the most, Jordan Whitehead, Marcus Williams, some other safeties out there that are notable veteran names. I don't know if any of those guys are Montravius Adams of safety. You know what I mean? If that's the kind of ballpark we're looking at. And I guess I'm not sure who that player would be, but safety, I think, is probably still where I'm at. I would throw out wide receiver, though, if they get to camp. Not yet. But between now and the beginning of the regular season, I would throw wide receiver into the mix when they have a better idea of where Jermaine Burton's at. Because if Jermaine Burton isn't where they want him to be, they've got Jamar T, Andre, Charlie, and then Charlie's been dealing with injuries. And then you've got Jermaine Burton, Kendrick Pryor, Isaiah Williams. That's the other guys we think they'd like. And you're probably rostering 6 receivers. So between now and the beginning of the regular season, if they don't feel like Jermaine Burton's where he needs to be and Charlie Jones is where he needs to be, they might be feeling actually quite pressed for receiver depth, even if you include Mike Gesicki in the conversation. Yeah,
I think it could happen very quickly. And what would they do? How will they do it? What I will say, and I'll have our lads up here too, someone to pay attention to at wide receiver. I was in on him last year at the end of the year. I think Isaiah Williams is a real slot guy. Like, I think he's going to be able to help in that area. What they drafted Charlie Jones for, I think Isaiah Williams can do. Will he show that? We'll see. But I think he does have that kind of talent, and we'll see if it happens. He would be one of my training camp sleepers. But to your point.
Well, but even if he does, then what's Charlie Jones doing at that point? You know what I mean?
Well, sure. No doubt. And that's it. So you're talking, you have your big two, and then you have Andre Yosevach and then it's question marks.
Yeah.
And the Jermaine Burton one is obviously he's the biggest wild card ever. Like you could
No doubt
tell me he has 6 touchdowns this year, or you could tell me he plays 6 snaps. Like
you think we're gonna hear from Joe Burrow about Jermaine Burton tomorrow? Speaking of coming up next time.
Yeah. You want me to ask him about Jermaine?
Do you think it's worth asking?
No, because here's why I'm not going to ask it. Because Joe's probably just going to praise him. Because what do you want him to do? Crap all over him?
Yeah. I mean,
like it's a tough spot.
If you ask specifically, like, have you noticed a difference in Jermaine Burton's approach this year to last year? You think still not getting a good answer there?
No, but because I do think Jermaine's approach probably has changed based on just me I saw him on draft.
Or how is it different? You know,
sure.
What's the difference in the approach?
Yep.
Yeah.
And if it's different, he's talented. But if it's not, then it will be my favorite time ever because we can talk about wide receiver depth and how we can add wide receivers.
A wide receiver with a premium pick in 2026.
I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. We could sign one, baby.
Yeah.
That's what Mike Kotz, call me so I can go over my wide receiver list. You
have a wide receiver list right now?
I always have a wide receiver list.
Of course.
Me.
Of course.
That's right.
Just off screen there is James' whiteboard with a list of best available wide receivers.
When I say we, it's Locked On Bengals. We always have it's literally right there. James Rapine's big board list of receivers.
There it is. We will hear from Joe Burrow as the Bengals have an open practice to the media on Tuesday, and I am expecting that we'll have to talk more about Trey Hendrickson in the fallout from Joe Burrow's comments tomorrow. We'll have whatever Joe Burrow has to say covered for you, in addition to some takeaways, perhaps, as the Bengals continue their offseason program. Until then, thanks for listening to this episode of the Locked On Bengals podcast. Hoo day, and have a good one.